Well, I see my hosts there, and looks like we got a few participants already here. It was good timing. Everybody's really on time. If it's anything like it is here, you're just inside, staying away from the heat. So I don't know where everybody is, but it's hot when you feel like, oh, 105. That's not so bad. Yeah, last few days have been pretty miserable about here, but I shouldn't complain. Andrew and the guys have, and Ry and his team have really been feeling it. So, hello everyone. I'm Dominic Chappellet, and we've got a couple key members of our team here. We've got Ry Richards and Andrew Opatz. Ry is our associate winemaker, and Andrew is our vineyard manager, and we'll go a little more into that as this goes along. But a couple of viewer shout outs for those viewers who have stuck with us for webinar after webinar, and we are so grateful for that, and thank you. So Erica and Glenn Gibbs of Lake Geneva, Susan and Eric of Troy, Ohio, and then Ron and Betsy Hocutt of Kernsville. They are Pritchard Hill and Hideaway and club members, and they keep putting up with these webinars. So you're either recording them and having a great time laughing at us, or you're actually enjoying it. Hopefully it's the latter of the two. This is fun for us to do, so thanks for being here. So this is a broad discussion about harvest itself. This isn't focused on specific wines. This is about what it is to be in the middle of harvest, and we got slammed into the middle of it quick with this heat.
Yes, we did.
I picked a refreshing white wine, some San Giacomo Chardonnay. Ry, I think, has a little signature cab, and Andrew has been out in the field since 2 o'clock this morning. So I think he's just having water, which
a lot of it.
Anyway, so welcome everyone. We will try our very best to be monitoring the chat and the Q&A. So when you have questions, please put them in there, and we'll try to respond as quickly as possible. This is officially our 55th harvest on Pritchard Hill. For me, it's my 54th. So this has been my life for a long, long time. And for those of you who signed on a little early, you saw the earlier version of me, very early version with the blonde hair and sitting under there waiting for harvest to begin underneath a grapevine. That's how I actually remember a lot of my childhood was, around harvest. That was the main focus of every year, as you might imagine. And back then I remember being awakened by gondolas rumbling past the house, listening every day to the guys out in the vineyard chattering and singing, and it's just a vibrant time of year, and as it still is. One of the differences is, and we'll get into this too, the picking isn't happening in the middle of the day anymore, and thank goodness when you've got heat like this. So couple little things. Ry, would you put up, so every year on the first grapes that get picked here on Pritchard Hill, which are always our Chenin Blanc, we get together with the vineyard crew, and as many people are here in the morning as we can, and sort of bless the beginning of harvest. And my mother was here once again to do that with us. There's the Chenin that came in, and there's Mom. She's there talking to everyone, and of course, made us all take a minute and think about what it is to have been here for this amount of time, and the amount of history and legacy that we've got within our group, and that keeps building. Ryan and Andrew might be newcomers at their in this, but they've still been here a while. But when you've got people like Enrique Rodriguez, who's celebrating, I can't figure out if it's his 50th year or his 52nd year, but either way, it's a long time, and he's our vineyard foreman.
He's been here the whole time.
50 years. He started in 72.
Okay, 72, is that that's official?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to stop yammering on, and it's going to be handed over to you guys for a second here. So let me know, from your perspective, either or both of you, how's harvest going so far?
Ry, do you want to
Andrew,
start?
you want to? Absolutely. I am so excited about this harvest. We had this great growing season so far. It's been relatively cool this summer, and then all of a sudden we kind of kicked into gear and things are really ramping up. That's always a really fun, dynamic time, I think, here in the winery, because I get a semi-new team of interns every year. We got to teach them how to operate. We got to teach them how and what and why we're doing what we're doing. And so it's this youthful chaos, but that's what starts harvest. And it's how we kind of bring about all wines here on Pritchard Hill. Is at first it feels a little chaotic, and then week 2, which is kind of coming up next week, things start to really gel and we get into a rhythm. And I just feel like harvest is this, big communication event between our two teams, vineyard and winery, and we really get to sing as one. Most of the year we're separate. We're doing all of our separate things, winemaking versus grape growing. But we culminate in this 2 months, and that's when we get to see the most of each other. That's when the most back and forth. It's the most work. It's the most chaos. It's the most fun.
I'll just chime in there. One of the things that I noticed was that you're all on the same radio channel.
Yep.
Which typically, so we have radios up here because we don't get great cell service everywhere. And they're a way for us to keep in contact team by team. The vineyard is usually on their channel and the winery doing their thing. But harvest comes on and they have to work in concert every moment. So everybody's chattering. You hear everything going on from either side. For those of us who've got a radio on our hip, it can be pretty entertaining.
It's very true, Dominic. Communication is key during these times, obviously. And
Yeah.
during a heat event, this late, communication is very key.
Yeah. So you've spoken about harvest right now. Andrew, can you just go into what you've seen as far as the growing season, starting with the rains that we've got, spring, summer, sort of move us through what it's been like, maybe compared to last year or the year before.
Sure. Really good question. And well, to start off, I think we need to talk about last year and what we dealt with last year. 21 was a interesting year where we didn't have a whole lot of water to work with. And so that was our challenge last year. And oftentimes there are holdover effects that you see the next year. And so we start off this year as sort of thinking this is a recovery year. The vines took a beating last year, didn't have a lot of water, small canopies, small crop. And we said early on, we got to build this canopy back. We got to get these vines back to health. We got to get them to be able to crop to the what we expect up here off the hill. And I'm pleased to say that I think we got there in terms of revitalizing these vines. I can't stress enough how rough it was in 21.
Yeah.
Every year we start with full reservoirs, and we didn't last year, and it was a challenge. And early on, we had to make a plan on how to get back to where we were. And so it was early irrigation. It was a very, very tight and specific pruning protocol to get our spur positions correct and all the buds that we want to push for this year. And our fertility program played a big part of getting things back. And so, long story short, this was a recovery year. We put a lot of effort into using the water that we actually have this year and putting it in the right places. And so we have full canopies and our crop is looking good. I call it pretty close to average. And looking at things last year at this time and looking at things this year at this time, I'm a happy person.
So I am trying to look at the Q&A. Somebody has said that the chat is disabled, so I will see what I can do about that. But keep coming with the Q&A. I see some Don and Teresa are drinking some Zin, which is nice. Oh, and so is David Krebler, 2010 Clone 4, and they're drinking Zin, Clone 4, and San Giacomo Chardonnay. Well done.
Good job.
Oh, we got a question. Do you irrigate? Well, I think you sort of were talking about that. We absolutely do, but it's drip irrigation, no overhead watering, very, very specific. Couple reasons for that, and please chime in. But one of them is, we want that concentrated fruit. So we're not trying to build up big, huge berries out there. So we just want enough so that the vines can withstand whatever heat is coming up, and so they're healthy. So drip irrigation allows us to do that. And
I could elaborate on that, Dominic, if you'd like. We absolutely do irrigate our vines. We're up in the hills here in really thin soils, varying depth of soil, varying aspects to the sun that things are growing on. And so there's a lot of different growing conditions up here. There are some areas that don't require very much water. There's some areas that require a lot of water. And so it's the lack of uniformity in these hills that forces us to have to irrigate in situations. It's the lack of uniformity and the differences in these hills, however, that give Ry and Philip and their team a bunch of tools in the toolbox to work with.
Yeah.
And so,
Exactly.
Long story short, again, irrigation is needed up in these hills, in these volcanic soils, to get these vines to the finish line and to get these vines through a heat event like we're going through right now.
And what Andrew said is pretty nuanced too. I mean, Andrew and his team, Dave, Andrew, really know every aspect of this hill, vine by vine. We talk about blocks and that sort of thing, but they really know like a corner of a block. This piece needs this attention. And then how we pick here at Chappellet is incredibly dynamic. Every year we go out to the vineyard, and if we're seeing things that match or interplay, we can bring them in together and combine them in tank, or we can pick entire blocks. We have full estate control up here. And that's like, I just feel so privileged or spoiled because we get to do that. These micro lots that we're allowed to really focus on, really elevate and push our quality forward. And that's, again, back to that communication piece. These things change year in and year out. It's not always the same block that is the top block any given year. And we're always trying to find in any given scenario where that kind of, highest quality place is here on Pritchard Hill. And it's that knowledge of this hill, whether it be irrigation or pruning or suckering, how they're handling things, and then how they can bring it to us in the winery in these little batches so that we can really focus.
Ry made a really good point there, where some blocks perform on some years better than other blocks, and on other years those blocks don't perform as well as some other blocks that are up here. And so on a cooler year, there are blocks that perform really well. There's some good west facing, south facing blocks on thin soils that perform well on cooler years. On hotter years, we have some north facing blocks. We've got some terrace blocks and other blocks in the property that perform well in those situations. And so I feel lucky. I think we all feel very lucky that we have this piece of land that can provide this high quality fruit on different vintages, and we're able to find that fruit that can make that Pritchard Hill, and find that fruit that can make these killer wines that Ry and his team make.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that, and it's sort of a nice segue into one of the next things I want to talk about. But before that, I want to acknowledge all the people who are doing questions and answers. My niece Sequoia is out there. She's in
Keep 'em going.
Alaska. Or that's what she says. A number of questions about the heat spike and how that affects the timing of harvest and how we deal with that. So maybe just a quick update on that.
Yeah, I was going to kind of tackle that one, Dominic. You know, the important thing to remember about heat is it's like anything else that happens in grape growing, winemaking. It's dynamic. There's no one way I can answer your question about what heat is doing to this vintage or doing to any individual grape at any one time. It's about daily assessment. You know, we have some blocks that look completely unaffected by heat and others that we need to focus on, and we'll get them in as soon as possible. And I think that that's really the important key here is any given slope, a little more soil, a little less soil, Malbec versus Cabernet Merlot versus Cabernet Franc. This is a completely dynamic event. And we're kind of used to that. I mean, I've been doing this for approaching 16 years, which is again around here at Chappellet, pretty short. And Andrew's been doing it for 15 years as well. And we've seen many different growing seasons. You know, we've had heat events like this in 17, was a big, you know, pile of heat at the beginning of the vintage, and we dealt with that. And I think wine quality really soared that year. Or other years where you have a lot of rain early in the season. How do you get out of that? Well, again, it's like any of these natural loops we find ourselves in as grape grower winemakers. We got to go with it. And we're kind of have this whole big pile of different procedures or tricks, if you will, to kind of deal with those things. But it's a daily basis on what heat is doing to us. And so I think that's kind of the broad rationale. Andrew, anything to add on that?
I think part of it too is having the flexibility and ability to react quickly. We're seeing this right now, today, this minute, that things move very fast during these late season heat events. And getting to know the hill, getting to know the blocks that we work with, you sort of know what blocks are susceptible. You sort of have an idea of what blocks can hang on. But you know, it's Ry getting out there. It's myself, our viticulturist Stephanie, Dave Pirio, Phil Titus. We're all getting out there and getting our eyes out there every day, and reacting and figuring out what needs to come in now. You know, Ry and Philip are looking at flavors. We're looking at fruit condition and canopy condition, as well as flavors, and we're all getting our eyes out there, and it's about reacting and communicating.
So again, the chats keep coming in, and people are wondering about night picking or when we pick. And so, you know, can we talk about how that has changed over the years and what we do when we pick and why we do it? And while you do that, I'm going to throw up a few historical photos just to show that the family was out there early on. So either one of you, go ahead and.
Well, yeah, timing of picking, when we pick, why we pick. Nowadays, we're picking at night. That wasn't always the case back in the day, as you will see in these pictures. And we do it for a couple of reasons. One of them is logistics. Ry is receiving a lot of fruit every day, especially during these heat events. And he does the old tank juggle, and you know, he's got to make sure that the fruit goes into the right tanks. Got to make sure you have tank space to last a certain amount of time to get through fermentations. So logistics is a big part of it, and if we can get the guys fruit first thing in the morning, get them going, and get to crushing, it makes the day easier for everybody. You know, there is another thought and a legitimate thought about getting fruit in early in the morning when it's nice and cool. That helps things for Ry and his team quite a bit. And in a lot of cases, that's true. During a heat event, and we're going to be saying heat events quite a bit, I'm sure, during this webinar, that's not always the case. Everybody, well, I don't want to get too deep into it, but high temperatures during the day is what we all talk about, right? But low temperatures during the night is just as crucial for these vines as well. And sometimes during these heat events, it's, we don't have that cooling at night, and these vines are working almost as hard as in the night as they are during the day. And so a lot of times the cool fruit issue is very beneficial. Sometimes that's not the case.
Yeah.
The other thing about, picking at night is much better for quality, because we get cool fruit. Having colder fruit allows us to do a nice cold soak. We get to run our analysis to kind of get all of our winemaking geeky chemistry straight before we kind of launch into fermentation. That said, somebody asked, if higher nighttime temperatures are affecting us. They are warmer, but if it's between 50 and 60 on my end, we still have ample chilling power here to bring down our cold soaks to a nice 50 to 55. And that's where we hang out during cold soak right before we launch fermentation. That's just to kind of let the grapes break down, marinate. We get to know the tank a little bit, we get going. And so really nighttime temperatures haven't affected, fruit quality in the winery yet. Long-term, they may go up, they may go down. There's kind of all these different nuanced trends to how climate is changing, but on any given year, seasonal variation still outpaces climate change for winemaking, grape growing at this point.
Really good point.
We within the last 3 years, you can look at, it's been very hot. It's also been very rainy, very dry, very cold within a 5-year period. So you really want to reiterate that seasonal change is the major event.
And going back to that nighttime temperature idea that I mentioned, that more affects vine performance rather than fruit going in the winery. And so I mention it because it's just one extra maybe challenge we have to deal with in terms of irrigation management when you have those high nighttime temperatures.
Yeah. So Andrew, I alluded to this right when we began, but I'm just gonna, since you're talking a little bit and maybe you're on a roll, there's been a bit of a shift this year, and it's been 36 or 37 years in the making. And you are right there at the crux of it. So I'm going to let you take it from there and tell people what I'm talking about.
Sure. Well, Dave Pirio, our longtime vineyard manager, the guy that sort of paved the way to where we are here. He's built this vineyard over 36 years and brought it to where it is. Has decided to slow down, and I'm hoping, or I'll be filling some very big shoes, and I'm very happy and feel very privileged to have that opportunity.
Yeah.
I got to say, I'm extremely lucky to be able to hang around Dave for 15 years and pick his brain constantly and learn from him and exercise his patience and to learn under him. And so I feel very lucky to be able to have a guy like that to learn from. It doesn't happen for a lot of people, and I'm just feel very lucky.
Yeah, well, we plucked him right out of college, got him as soon as he got out of there. My brother Cyril used to play basketball with him in high school, so we've known him really our whole lives. And we could not be more grateful for the years that he has given us. And we've all got a lot to learn from him. We talk about patience. Dave's one of the guys, he sort of sits back, he watches, doesn't say a lot, but when he talks, everybody listens because he's got something really important to say. And that's sort of, that carries on throughout the vineyard. And I think that Andrew, I can't imagine that you haven't picked up a lot of that over the years. And I'm really excited for the next 35 years with you, or more, right? Let's keep it going.
Absolutely. Let's see how long this thing can last. But going back again, Dave really, he built this place into what it is. There's so many improvements in the vineyard that he has implemented, that he has, he's kind of pioneered a lot of hillside farming techniques. And, he is one of the handful of people in the industry, and there are some, but when he speaks, you want to listen and you want to absorb it because it's going to benefit you.
Yeah.
I think you guys are touching on something that's really important here at Chappellet too, is that, we have this generational knowledge. Dave's been farming here since '84, and Philip's been winemaker here. He was first here in the early '80s and then came back in 1990. And as well as their knowledge, then, we've been around for a decade plus. So we have this generational legacy where we remember how things were, or what happened that year. When we were looking at last year farming vintage 21, it reminded me a lot of 2013. And so Philip and I could have a common dialogue of how do we handle 2021 based on our experiences in 13. And that really, I think, is part of what makes Chappellet special. It's this, generational time here on Pritchard Hill, through the family, through the people that are on the, bit and winemaking team. We really know this hill, and we know what's happened to it, and what may happen to it in the future based on all of that experience that we just kind of built up through time.
Yeah, interesting that you say that. I think, we've seen across the valley there's a lot of winemakers work at 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 different wineries. They consult and they do that. Vineyard managers do the same thing. They work, there's vineyard management companies who work, vineyards all over the valley and in Sonoma. To have a focused team that has been in one place and has learned this property so intimately and been able to work back and forth, I believe that is a unique thing. We don't see as much of that these days. Of course, back in the day, it was little family-run wineries throughout the Napa Valley, and that's what happened. There's less of that going on, and the ability to really know a piece of property in and out, and for the connection between the winemaking team and the vineyard team to be here on site, and not hiring a consultant winemaker who comes up once a week, and then we just made and then a vineyard management company who's managing 20 other properties. That's pretty special. So I'm really grateful that we've been able to do that over the years, and to have this, like you said, Ry, sort of generational longevity that's being handed down. I'm looking at the chat. A lot of people making comments. Some people are drinking Pinot Noir. Some people, let's see, James Watson's drinking some Pinot. Some of the chats have come offline, but keep them coming. Keep the questions coming, and I'll answer them as the new ones come up. Somebody says that they've been drinking, that they bought a few cases of Searles Cuvée. I don't know if either of you remember that, but there was.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Remember that one? He actually got his name on the label.
Long ago.
Yeah, I haven't managed to be able to do that one yet, so maybe I'll get my name on a label one day. So this may seem like a a simple question, but I'm going to throw it out to both of you because I know that it really involves you both. How do you assess the grapes as to when they're ready to be picked?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'll take that one. So first, there's we always talk about winemaking as half artistry, half chemistry, or something. First, it just has to be in the right place, right? You need the right bricks, the bricks sugar concentration, and then acid, to show that it's within the right box for making wine. That's the easy part. The rest of it is all sensory derived. You know, Andrew, myself, Philip, Dave, we're constantly walking fields and actively tasting all of these grapes. And it's based on flavor maturity. And that's a really hard thing to describe because you kind of have to practice for a while. Early in the season, if you taste Cabernet when it's not ready, it almost tastes kind of like basil or asparagus or green beans. And you just go, gosh, how's this ever going to work? And then 2-3 weeks later, all that green goes away and this beautiful blackberry, jammy, curranty, cassis moment happens out in the field. And it's almost like a light switch. And when you hit that, it's time to go. And that comes along with everything else. That comes along with tannin maturity, that comes along with color maturity, really phenolic development, and all of those great compounds that grapes make so that you can have a big round wine. That's that moment in the field, is when you taste a berry and you almost can't stop eating it. We have to, otherwise we would never survive harvest. We'd eat way too many grapes. But that's that moment, is there's a turning point, and each varietal has its own turning point where it goes from kind of not right, under-flavored, less nuanced to this big burst of berry and freshness.
I'm just going to chime in, and I'm sorry to cut you off, to Andrew, but what I find really interesting is that while technology and science and lab testing, all of that has definitely gotten more and more specific over the years, and we use that on every level. It's really interesting to me that when it comes down to it, the decision to pick, the decision to when it goes into the bottle, the decision, all the major decisions that happen come down to putting it in your mouth, smelling it, tasting it, and saying, okay, now it's ready. You might back all that up in the lab, but it really is it has never left that very human aspect of winemaking. That's been with us since the very beginning. Is this good? Is this what I like? Is this the direction I want? And that's determined by, your taste, smell, touch, every sense is being activated in many ways, throughout the harvest. And that's certainly the case when we're deciding what to pick. Did you, I might have missed it, but did you talk about actually crunching on the seeds and what that can tell you?
Andrew?
Yeah, sure. As things get ripe, seeds and pulp in the berry, they change. And as Ry's describing about early Cabernet, you get some of those green flavors, and they come from skins and seeds. And early on, these seeds are nice and green, and the pulp is kind of gooey, and those are indicators of, it's not quite ready. Those are not indicative to good tannin flavors and development. And as we get closer and closer to harvest, those seeds, they get a little browner, they get a little crunchier, less soft, and that's one of the indicators that things are about ready. I was thinking about sort of what I look at as things approach harvest, and it happens a bit earlier, I guess, for me. Obviously, there's variation when things go from green to red in the berries, but canes lignify, shoot tips start slowing down. Some of these leaves, basil leaves, stop functioning and want to fall off. There's these sort of indicators in the plant, end of the season for the plant. The vine's saying, yeah, I'm kind of getting done. I've run my course, and you can see those in the vine. And those are indicators for both irrigation management and time to get out there and start tasting things and evaluating when things are ready.
So I've gotten 3 or 4 questions about vineyard not on Pritchard Hill. Some having to do with some of our grower collection wines. Some having to do with, one specifically was asking about Sugarloaf, which is a vineyard that we source from. Andrew, can you just tell us a little bit about our fruit sourcing that we do off of Pritchard Hill? And let me just start by saying, you know, Pritchard Hill for us is obviously where my father came to live out his dream, and that we're, you know, continuing on, and we feel like this is an ideal place to make the best Cabernet in the world. Not to put too fine a point on it, but you know, it doesn't mean that we don't from time to time look outside of ourselves for other great sources of vineyards. Some of that augments some of our Cabernets. Those of you who are familiar with our grower collection know that the grower collection is all being sourced fruit from over in Sonoma. So when we are looking at sourcing fruit from other areas, and Andrew, maybe I'll just let you run with it.
Sure.
What's that process? What does that look like?
That's a great question. I think the way I look at it, and I think the way we all sort of think about it is, you know, we started here on Pritchard Hill, and we built a wine style that comes from Pritchard Hill. And Ry, I'll speak about Bordeaux, and maybe if you want to speak on some of the Sonoma stuff, we can do that. We established ourselves here on Pritchard Hill. These are the eastern hills of the Napa Valley. Up here in elevation, it's a drier part of the valley. It's hotter part of the valley. Really great for concentrated Cabernet. And so when we look for other Cabernets and other Bordeaux varietals, we don't want to veer too far off of what we know and what we've established up here. And so we look for sites that are reflective of where we are here, but they're not exactly here. And so we're still looking at the eastern hills here in the Napa Valley, but we're looking mainly nowadays, we're looking south of us. And if you think about North Napa Valley versus South Napa Valley, North Napa Valley is a bit warmer. It tends to ripen earlier, and things come into the winery typically earlier up in the north. As you move south, it's a little cooler, tends to be a little later. Not always the case, but tends to be. And so we look in the eastern hills, and we look south. And as we go south, all of a sudden we're into Atlas Peak, and we find a lot of really amazing fruit in that area. And so we source a lot of fruit from the Atlas Peak area. Altimeter, Stagecoach, Broken Rock. These are premier vineyards in sites that we deem appropriate for the type of wines that we're making. As you go even further south, you get into the Sugarloaf Ranch, where we source some fruit from. And so what we're doing here is, if we all sourced fruit from a semi-specific location in the valley, it'd probably all come in at once on most years. And so as we source this fruit, we're sort of staggering, for lack of a better term, fruit coming in. Ry can only take so much fruit a day. And Philip and Dave have really established these grower relationships in order to get fruit from sites that we deem fit our style.
Yeah, I think Andrew summed it up well. Is usually we go looking for rocks. You know, we grow our vines on rock here on Pritchard Hill, and all of the sites that he described. I mean, one's literally called Broken Rock. The other one's Sugarloaf is incredibly rocky, and then, you know, on the Burgundy side of things for grower collection on Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, very similar in a way. Obviously, you know, not on rock because they're in Carneros and Russian River, and there's different soil series there. But we really look to the pinnacle of what they have to offer. Much of our Chardonnay is bench landed. It's on cobble and rock rather than heavy clay. And much of our Pinot Noir is the same thing, as we look for bench land on this thing called Goldridge Sandy Loam, which is the premium soil in Russian River. And we really work with growers too that are serious Many of them are family farmers, very much like the Chappellets. The San Giacomos have just celebrated 95 years of farming this year. The Duttons have been farming for over 90 years in Green Valley. And again, there's family relationships are behind so many of these operations. And they know the Chappellet legacy. They know that we've been around the block enough to have street cred as winemakers and grape growers. And those relationships really tie those grower relations together, as well as the places they cultivate.
Well said.
So this is a key question from Chris. He said, is the Chappellet Pritchard Hill 100% estate Pritchard Hill fruit? We're all giving that a
Yes,
thumbs up.
sir.
Yes, and I can tell you that that goes right back to those talks about Dave Perio and what we've been able to do with these vineyards, and how knowledge of this specific property has allowed us to make that wine, has also allowed us to increase production on that wine because of the quality of the vineyards here. They have, since the moment that Dave stepped onto our property, his goal was to make the greatest quality grapes that he could, so that the winemaking team had the best opportunity to make the greatest quality wine. And we believe he's done that. The vineyards are healthier than they've ever been. We've changed farming methods into 100% organic. It's a lot more work. We do cover crops, a lot of handwork. There's so much that goes into doing organic farming that is labor intensive, but all of that gives us the opportunity to make that Pritchard Hill Estate Cabernet Sauvignon. So yes, that's the long answer. It is 100% estate grown, and that's that's what makes it. It's showing off this place. It says, okay, this is what this property can do. When we branch out from that, it's because we love making great wine and we look to other great places to source from. But we want to make sure that everybody knows, look what happens when we take the best off of this property. And I think that it's continues to be a wine that stands up to the greatest wines in the world. And how fantastic is that, to really be living my father's dream that he set off to have. He didn't come up here to start a winery to just make wine. He wanted to make great wine, and for whatever reason, through some research and a lot of luck, we found a piece of property that has gone on to be looked at as one of the greatest places really in the world to grow Cabernet Sauvignon. Pretty incredible. So thank you for the question. It allowed me to ramble on and get really excited about what we do here. So I appreciate it.
I think you touched on something important too, Dominic, is the sustainability aspect. Our Andrew and Dave farm these vineyards organically, which is no simple task. That's a lot of effort goes into that. And then also, we are constantly redeveloping here on Pritchard Hill. Is every year there's 5 to 10% of the vineyard is in redevelopment. And that's so that these vines are in the prime of their life all the time. We always have sets and blocks of vineyard that are always here to deliver that quality and ready for the next vintages ahead because of that constant replanting. We look at the oldest block and say, well, how many more years does it have in it? And we come to an agreement about what's the redevelopment plan? Is it going into a new variety? Is that ground, going to be something different, or do we want a new clone or different row direction? And as the property has evolved, these things just keep going, and that sustainability is key because that's how we can deliver Pritchard Hill quality year in and year out.
Yeah. We got a question here about Zinfandel. So we're speaking about Pritchard Hill. We don't grow Zinfandel up here on Pritchard Hill, but looks like we got a fan out there, and they would like to know where our Pritchard Hill comes from and maybe why it's so great.
Sure thing. It comes from a place called Bald Mountain. It's across the valley, actually, on Mount Veeder. It's a dry farm Zinfandel. It's over 50 years old, head trained, beautiful, gorgeous old style stuff. It's pretty amazing that it's dry farmed at elevation. It's about 2,000 feet, but Zin can kind of deal with a lot of different things. It's really kind of a powerhouse in terms of longevity, in terms of being able to be dry farmed and make a nice big crop and have tons of flavor and spice. We're there at Bald Mountain because we really think it's a special place for Zin. It has just a wonderful bouquet. It's very spicy. Yeah, how we handle it in the winery is very similar to many other things. We never try to make the Zin too tannic. We want it to be a very round profile in the mouth. We blend it with Petit Syrah to kind of, inject a little blackberry poison into it. And that's also kind of heritage California winemaking, is those two varieties kind of they need to be together. So that's kind of enough, a little nutshell on Zin.
Before I answer the next question, I have a question of my own that's in my notes. Andrew, can you talk about hand picking versus machine picking, and which one do we do and why?
Great question. Yeah, hand picking versus machine harvesting. Up here on Pritchard Hill, it's all hand for a few reasons. And I kind of want to preface this by, I don't want to dog harvest machine harvesting. It has come quite a long way since its infancy, and there's a lot of amazing fruit that's picked by machine, makes amazing wine by machine. And so nothing to dog about machine harvesting. Up here in the hills, we don't have the flattest ground in the world to run a big machine across these vineyard rows to harvest. That's one thing. We also pride ourselves in getting Ry and Philip and the winemaking team the cleanest, most intact fruit we can possibly get them. And we feel that hand harvesting is the way to do that. Both Dave and I have talked about bringing a machine up here to try it out and see how it goes. And I'm not saying that's completely off the table, but what's working for us is hand harvesting. And part of that is going back to what Ry was mentioning about finding the fruit that is ready and getting that fruit, whether it's a quarter of a block, a half a block, or that full block, into the tank when it needs to get in there. When you're machine harvesting, that gets pretty tough to find these little micro lots, because our crews are going to 4, 5, 6 different blocks sometimes to get fruit into the winery that day. And it gets a bit tough to do these little micro picks with a machine. And so I would say it's the terrain, it is the quality and condition of the fruit as it comes into the winery, and it's how we like to pick up here. We'll grab 2 tons out of block 13, 4.5 tons out of block 9, and whatever maybe to make that amazing tank of wine. And so I guess that's the best way to answer that one.
The question went away, but I wanted to at least touch on it. Somebody asked about our Malbec and whether that's coming from up here on Pritchard Hill, and so might as well let them know what's going on with Malbec. Why do we make it? What's happening?
Yeah, so we do grow our own Malbec here on Pritchard Hill. We also purchase Malbec from growers, all Eastern Hillside, Napa Valley. Malbec is the texture wine. We use it to take Hillside Cabernet and kind of just bring it back a little bit, just amp it down, provide some roundness. It's the real mid palate. It has a lovely super cherried nose, and Malbec's a great blender because it has all this color. It's very vibrant, and it really has that round mouthfeel. Malbec's all about that round, silky, glossy tannin mouthfeel, and so that really blends well with Petit Verdot from a hillside site or Cabernet on the hillside, because it kind of just takes those wines and just brings the edge back a little bit.
On the farming side, I love farming Malbec. It's a bit of a forgiving varietal up here in these hills. It has a better ability to regulate itself in terms of heat stress. So on some years, we can let that stuff just hang and marinate. and let Ryan and his team get some Cabernet in, get them in tanks, and then I mean, we can just sort of dial in the pick time for Malbec, because it does have a bit of hardiness to it, and in terms of regulating itself for heat stress. So bring on
It just
Malbec.
keeps on trucking.
I love it.
It is a solid stout variety.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was always of the understanding that Malbec can be very temperamental, and I guess that's mostly in the spring that can happen, where it can be affected by the temperature, by frost, by different things, and can do something that we refer to as shatter. And I think people were reticent to plant Malbec because of that. But you know, up here, it seems like we found a good place for it. It does well for us. It wants to be up here in this area. Am I right in that? And I'm fine being wrong. Andrew,
No,
so.
Dominic,
No,
that's a
you're
really good
you're
point.
right on.
That's a really good point. Malbec, certain clones of Malbec can be shattery, but we've found clone 595. We love that clone. That's not as shattery, and if you put it on the right rootstock in the right location, we can get our tonnage out of it. And you rarely think of things hitting that 4 ton per acre mark up here in the hills, but Malbec can do that sometimes, and it can hang there, and it can get ripe, and it can be amazing.
Yeah, that's one of the varieties that's probably most improved through just development over time, finding the right clone and the right rootstock combination. And now it just sets a nice, big, pretty crop most times.
So I'm looking at the time, and I'm realizing we're coming close to the end. And this is not surprising to me, because I feel like we could talk about harvest for 2 hours easily. It's so intense. There's so much going on. It's so much, you know, it is what we are looking towards for the whole year. This is the moment that everything else we do in the year leads up to. Not to say that we don't have work to do for the rest of the year, but without this, and without this working well, we have nothing. I'll try to hone in and sort of wrap things up a little bit before we have to go. And I'm going to do that by asking you, Ry, what does harvest look like for the cellar interns? You know, what is a typical day in the life of that? When do you start? When do you end? Let us know.
Sure. So yeah, Andrew starts at 2. We don't start at 2.
Sometimes you can
usually
end at 2.
Sometimes we'll. Oh, that's a low. Yeah,
That's
that
a
means
tough
something
day.
bad has happened.
Yeah.
Usually we arrive in the morning, you know, shortly after these guys are done picking. So anywhere from 5 to 7 in the morning. Get fruit in, weigh it, get prepped for the day, and we're either crushing or pressing, probably about 10 to 12 hours straight, and then we clean up and go home. Now we're also running, lab analysis. We're also doing fermentations. That's a really big part of people focus on crush. But once it's in tank, then we have to, make sure that we're getting the right fermentation kinetics, the right flavors, making sure these wines just really kind of build into their very best selves. And then all of the barrel work after that. So you ferment a wine through, well, now it's wine, now it needs to go into barrel. So we prep and fill, thousands of barrels. So at any one moment, all of these things are happening at once. And that's what makes it really dynamic is we're crushing, we're pressing, we're fermenting, we're filling barrels, we're escorting trucks. And every piece of this is as important as the other. It's just as important that all of our macerations go and ferments go in a very, sophisticated way, that we really make sure that they're high quality. And at the same time, it's just as important that the forklift continues to dump fruit into the crusher. Otherwise, we are backed up. So it really is a tremendous team effort. We bring in 5 interns. This is a really happy year for us in that we have internationals again. We have a woman from France and a woman from Argentina joining us for crush. They always bring their own stories, their own techniques, their own kind of flavor of harvest. There's Spanish, English, and French all happening in the winery all the time. And so it's really a fun process. Its harvest is the beginning. And so that's kind of our day in the big kind of ham and egg scramble as it happens.
So again, question and answers are happening over here. Stephen Rosenblatt says, first of all, thank you guys for taking the time in the middle of harvest to do this. Ry is in the winery right now. Believe me, he's listening to everything going on behind him because stuff is still happening. It's still going on. As you may have heard, Andrew was up at 2 o'clock. Well, he was probably up at 1 o'clock to get here at 2 o'clock to get to picking. So it's been a long day for him. You know, it is a pretty spectacular time of year. Sam Thanawala here says he'd like to sign up for an internship. Hey, you know what, buddy? Try
I'm sending my email right now.
Yeah. But once you're in, you're in. You can't leave.
That's
Can't
right.
go away.
You're committed.
It needs to happen throughout the whole harvest. So you know, if you really want to do it, we'll lock you in. No problem. But you're going to be in for it. It's no joke. It's long days. We've got I don't know.
Ry will get you working pretty hard.
Yeah, I've got a nephew or second cousin or whatever. Ry, do you have any a couple of photos of maybe some of the cellar interns?
Yeah, let me see if I can get those up here.
Anyway, I was saying my second cousin, I guess is what he is. That would be my cousin's son, is now in for his second harvest, and which means that the first one didn't scare him away too bad. But I will say, you talked about the barrels, Ry.
There they are.
Remy was feeling like barrel guy. He was like, well, yeah, I was bulldogging barrels today. And I asked him the next day, what were you doing today? Well, I was bulldogging barrels. So he went through, and he's the one in the upper right-hand corner on a barrel. Imagine that.
Yep. And Remy's he's pretty special because he's one of our only repeat offenders in terms of interns. You know, we came last year and he had the stones enough to show up back again this year. So he's definitely a key guy, and we're so happy to have him.
Well done, Remy.
Let's see. Sam says, as long as I can drink on the job. Well, yeah, there may be a little of that going on, but for the interns, not so much. You have to sort of work up the ladder to get into the actual blending and all of that.
We have no ocean.
Sam, you might be better off just being a club member and visiting us during harvest. And
yes,
you know what?
Come visit during harvest.
Work out getting you into a tank to shovel it out if you get here on the right time. I'm sure that something like that might be able to work out. I see Ry, hemming and hawing. Wait a minute, we don't want these guys in our team. So let's see. Oh, one more thing. What do the interns see as their worst task? What is it they don't want to do?
I sure hope there isn't the worst task. We rotate them all. I don't know. Winemaking is. I had one intern tell me years later. He still maintained contact as a friend of Chappellet to this day, and he said that winemaking turns out for him was 95% cleaning and 5% tasting wine, or doing wine. And that there is an aspect of that that's true. It's a lot of cleaning. It's a lot of sanitation. We got to get everything clean and pristine as possible so that we don't let Andrew's year-long effort to grow these kind of pristine grapes go to waste. It's our job to kind of protect that effort. And so it is a lot of cleaning. That said, it's on a nice hot day like this, when the crusher stops and you get to play with a bunch of big hoses and water everything up, it feels pretty good to clean up and mop out.
Well, on that note, Ry, I have to say I am very happy and happy that those grapes are in the best hands they can be once they get in the winery.
Well, so it's been about 10 minutes since I said we had to wrap up. And again, I knew that we'd be having trouble doing that because we could talk about this all night. Really, I'd like to thank everybody, of course, Andrew and Ry, for your participation in the middle of the most busy time of year. To all of you who were part of this and listening and participating through the question and answer. That's really fun for us because it lets us know you're engaged and we're not just up here talking to ourselves. So we appreciate that. I have a couple notes here that sort of housekeeping stuff. I'll just read it off. Answer any additional questions. Well, no, I'm not going to. We do want to let you know that we have a code, Harvest 22 for shipping, included on 6+ bottles to celebrate harvest. So if you type in Harvest 22, and because you're very excited about getting some wine after this webinar, which we hope you are, Harvest 22 will get you free shipping. The next webinar is October 27th. We'll taste through the newest releases included in our October club shipment. So for those of you wanting a little bit of in-depth view of what those wines are and be able to ask some questions about them, where they came from, what they're doing right now, please sign on to that. Again, that's October 27th. And thank you guys. Thank you all so much. Thank the two of you, again, Andrew and Ry, but really thank you to all of you who, I think we had at one point 81. We're down to 80. So you guys are stuck in for the whole thing, and we really appreciate that. It's fun for us to do this when we know that there's people out there listening and involved. So we'll keep making these things happen if we know there's the interest. And really, cheers. We will see you on the next one. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks again.
Cheers.
Great night.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for coming.
Happy harvest.